saying this morning, François Hollande officially kicking off his presidential campaign yesterday. What are the papers making of that then?
Well, here's a really key quote, Claire, on the front page of Libération. My adversary is the world of finance. That's what Libération's really thrilled about today, that he took that turn to the left yesterday, setting out a programme, setting out a whole tone that's clearly meant to try and unite everyone on the left. He's trying to tell every naturally socialist-leaning voter, France's working-class voters who are unhappy with the financial situation, that their natural place is voting for the socialists. Of course, what he's worried about, what polls are showing, is that they're increasingly turning to candidates who are managing to paint themselves as somehow outside of the system. On the one hand, the centrist François Bayrou, and on the other, of course, Marine Le Pen. Now, François Hollande needs to win those people back if he's going to win a decisive victory. And that's the target that he was going for yesterday, as Libération said. Now, they say that yesterday he managed to assuage a lot of the doubts that socialist-leaning voters had about him, worries that he was a bit too vague, that he didn't quite have the convictions, the kind of political weight necessary to take on Nicolas Sarkozy. Now, Libération thinks he calmed those doubts yesterday. The business paper, La Tribune, has also got that speech on their front page. They've spelt out on their front page the word that he used the most in yesterday's speech, equality. They say that's the kind of campaign theme that he needs to win those voters back. But they do say that what the financial system is a kind of vague and faceless adversary. What was missing in that speech yesterday was some concrete policy detail.
I imagine he didn't get such a glowing reception across the board, did he?
Well, he's certainly not left-wing enough, even after that speech for the communist paper L'Humanité. They've got a take-off and some impasses at Le Bourget on their front page now. They say on the inside that they want the socialist candidate to turn decisively against austerity policy, which he did refuse to do yesterday. He's still making sure his numbers add up. He's not promising anything he can't also pay for. But of course, that's far too left-wing for the right-wing paper Le Figaro. They've got Hollande flatters his left here as a front page. And in their editorial, they say he's just trotting out the same old platitudes that socialist presidential candidates have done at every election for the last 30 years, and he needs to realise times have changed.
Now, he also mentioned how he would speed up the withdrawal of French troops in Afghanistan.
Yes, he did. That's what the Catholic paper La Croix is focusing on for their headline today, the temptation of retreat from Afghanistan. Of course, both Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy have said in the last week that they want to speed up how quickly French troops are coming back from Afghanistan. At the moment, they're not due to be entirely brought back until 2014. But after 4 French soldiers were killed by a Taliban militant who'd infiltrated the Afghan National Army last week, they both want to pull troops out. Le Figaro is reporting on this today. They say the Taliban have realised their best tactic is to infiltrate the Afghan army, and there's nothing really that foreign troops can do to combat that, so it's time the troops were pulled out.
Now, there's another foreign policy issue that's become somewhat of a political hot potato in France, and that's the proposition to ban denying the Armenian genocide, and back in the headlines.
Yes, Libération are taking a look at this. Now, of course, politicians have come under fire for this being an electioneering measure, if you like. There's 500,000 Armenians in France. They want their votes. But Libération points out that there's also nearly 200,000 voters of Turkish origin in France. They're focusing on them today. There were some big demonstrations in Paris at the weekend. Now, they say this law stigmatises their entire community, and they're furious with French politicians.
And there's some big media news in France today.
There is. It's the launch of the French-language version of Huffington Post. Now, it doesn't launch until this afternoon, so I can't show you any articles just yet, but it's certainly got a lot of media attention here. There's an article in the magazine Marianne that we can have a look at, which, of course, is about the woman who's set to be the editor of French Huffington Post.
Anne Sinclair.
Indeed, Dominique Strauss-Kahn's wife. Now, that article says that she wasn't chosen for this job because of her journalistic experience, although, of course, she has a lot. She was a TV news star back in the 80s, but the article does rather take a laugh at that, saying that she apparently said last week that France's politicians remain in power too long. They're not shifted around often enough, which the article reckons is a little ironic coming from someone who was a TV news star 30 years ago. And they also say, though, that if what the Huffington Post is trying to do by picking her is attract as many column inches as possible in the French press, of course it's working. Everyone's talking about it.
Some there, of course, speaking of conflict of interest. Thank you very much for that look at the French press, Elena. Now, you're watching live from Paris. Coming up after the break, Focus. And today we head to Ivory Coast, where restoring nationwide security and stability is President Ouattara's #1 priority. Our team there followed a patrol in Abidjan.